Long ago, before Crater Lake existed, the Klamath people told a story about a mountain called Lao Yena. Beneath the mountain lived Lao, spirit of the below world. High above, amongst the stars, ruled Skell, spirit of the above world. Lao Yena stood between them. A mountain so tall that when Lao emerged from the depths and stood upon its peak, his head brushed the edge of Skell's domain. One day, Lao fell in love with Loha, the daughter of a Klamath chief, and she rejected him. Humiliated and enraged, Lao swore he would have his revenge. Fire poured from the mountain, the earth trembled, and so the chief called upon Skell for help. The gods went to war. They hurled a burning stone across the sky, the mountains roared, the world darkened with ash. The people watched in terror as the world seemed becoming apart around them. Fearing the end, 2 medicine men offered themselves in sacrifice, casting their bodies into the pit of the below world. Moved by their courage, Skell struck with renewed fury. He shattered the peak of Lao Yena and drove Lao deep beneath the earth, sealing him forever within the darkness below. The fires died and the ash settled. And where a mountain once stood, there only remained a lake of impossible blue, a final gift from Skell and a promise that peace would return. And thus, Crater Lake was born. What makes this story so fascinating to me is that it isn't just made up from nothing. Beneath the gods, the sacrifices, and the war of the heavens lies an actual event. Thousands of years ago, a mountain erupted, people witnessed it, people survived it, and then people told stories about it. Geologists discovered that around 7,700 years ago, Mount Mazama suffered a catastrophic volcanic eruption in what is now South Central Oregon, USA. The magma chamber emptied so quickly that the mountain collapsed in on itself, creating a caldera that eventually filled with rainwater to become Crater Lake. And because of the discovery of artifacts such as obsidian tools, spear throwers, and moccasins that have been found beneath the ash layers of Mazama to the north and east of Crater Lake, it is believed that the Klamath natives must have lived in the region as early as 7,700 years ago. The story told by the Klamath people perfectly preserved the exact mechanics of the eruption for thousands of years. It even matches the timeline that they said it occurred in. And what's so interesting about all this is how, or rather why, a volcanic eruption turns into a battle between the gods. And I don't think it's because the original event was forgotten. It's because stories have a tendency to evolve. They almost have this necessity to evolve. The factual retelling of an event is just not as compelling as a story complete with plots and characters and mystery. Each retelling emphasizes different details, different emotions, different meanings, until the retelling becomes more influential than the event itself. Very few people will experience the actual event that invokes a legend. Most people will experience the retelling. Normally that describes something like a religion or folklore or a historical event and not a Nintendo 64 game, and yet somehow that is exactly what happened to Majora's Mask. The original event here being the game itself. Released just 2 years after the Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask arrived in North America on October 26, 2000 after only a single year of development. Ocarina of Time quickly established itself as one of the most defining games of a generation. For many players, it was their first experience with the hero's journey. It was mine. I'm looking up the pictures of the box art for these games in different regions. I thought, oh, look, they look really cool. Japan has 2, and I'm like, what is the difference between the top one and the bottom one? The second one comes with the fucking expansion pack. What? It would negate the whole video. This whole video would be like not just irrelevant if North America had it. It was mine. It was a story about destiny and courage and about growing up. The world could be dark, but it was never hopeless. The people of Hyrule believed that the hero of time would return, and eventually he did. Kid me, not understanding that sequels could be wildly different, believed that Majora's Mask would be just like this. Majora's Mask, as a result, felt familiar and recognizable. It was the same engine, the same assets, and the same protagonist. But the stories people told felt completely different. Because this wasn't the Zelda people remembered for its grand adventure, it was a Zelda people remembered for how it made them feel. Majora's Mask takes place over the final 3 days of the world. A giant, malicious moon hangs overhead, growing larger with each passing hour. The people of Termina watch it descend in slow motion. Some panic, some grieve, and others try to desperately finish the things that they still feel are important. And at the center of all of it is Link, trapped in a time loop, reliving the apocalypse over and over again in the hope that this time he can stop doom scrolling and get to work on that project that he's been avoiding. Just kidding, that's me. This was a Zelda where everyone knew they were gonna die, where time itself was broken, and the Zelda where Zelda isn't even in the game? That made no sense to my child brain, by the way. The hero of time didn't feel like a chosen savior, he felt like a victim of fate. And the most important thing about this event is that it was surprisingly difficult to experience for yourself. This is because Majora's Mask required the Nintendo 64 expansion pack.
Included in Japan.
And it was something most people just didn't really have or have a reason to have.
Unless you bought the Japanese version.
DK64 came with one. Perfect Dark could at least function without it, but Majora's Mask said you have to go out and buy the game and the expansion pack.
Unless you bought the Japanese version.
This meant that a lot of kids had to go convince their parents to buy this strange piece of hardware for the sole purpose of playing a single game, and then also had to go modify their Nintendo to make it work. No way I'm explaining that as an 8-year-old. I would tell my own kids, no, no, you're gonna break the shit. This meant that Majora's Mask was just harder to get to. It was harder to rent, it was harder to borrow, you couldn't just bring it to a friend's house, you had to bring your entire system. For a lot of kids, the game just felt kind of ethereal, just out of reach. You knew it existed, but you didn't get to experience Majora's Mask directly. You experienced it through other people, through playground conversations, through older siblings, through rumors. And this is a big contributor to why the game felt so mysterious.
But not in Japan.
Every story I heard about Majora's Mask felt slightly disconnected from reality. Not because they were false, not that I thought they were true, kids lie and embellish all the time. The problem was that these stories felt like they belonged to a completely different game. There's the obvious things like the big moon with the horrifying face. There's the masked salesman, which was the scariest fucking thing as a kid. And certain things just felt like there was more weight to it than you were being told, such as the Astral Observatory, which, aside from its great music, also just felt like it had this mystery to it that you just weren't being told the full story on. Oh yeah, and Majora's Mask is not actually a mask, it is a puppet master wearing Skull Kid like a puppet. In a final fight with the mask is this multi-stage cosmic horror being where the mask slowly becomes more and more human, or at least humanoid. It's this weird eldritch whipping torture demon, just like all great Japanese bosses. Looking at you, Kirby. Every description felt like someone had taken a Zelda game apart and reassembled it incorrectly. Familiar and recognizable, but just kind of wrong. Years later as an adult with unlimited access to the internet and absolutely no intention of actually playing the game, I did what any reasonable person would do. I listened to someone explain the plot while occasionally glancing at my screen when something caught my interest. And being totally reasonable and not hyperfixating on this thing, I listened to as many breakdowns as I could. And the result was strange. I understood the game, or at least I clarified the parts that were confusing as a kid. The masks, the time loop, the apocalypse, the feeling of dread, but I didn't really fill in the details. And somehow that made the game feel even more mysterious. I'd gotten the basics, I understood what was happening, the plot, but I never really got explanations for the things that created the mystery around the game. The broad strokes were clear, but everything in between remained blurry. Like hearing people talk about bits and pieces of a book you never read. And I don't think I was alone. By this point, millions of people knew Majora's Mask, not because they had played it, but because they had somebody explain it to them, be it a friend or a retrospective theory. Importantly, each retelling preserves the important parts while quietly giving it some personality, reshaping everything else. The story was being told and retold, and stories have a tendency to evolve and ask questions. Why is this game so strange and captivating? People began searching for explanations. This game theory, Link is Dead, did insanely well 13 years ago, with MadPat explaining that Link is dead, Termina is purgatory, and the game takes you through the 5 stages of grief. A quick search today brings up theories from recent years that are still doing really great despite this being a 25-year-old game. Although these theories are very different, they have a shared property of giving shape to a feeling, a way to explain something that many players understood instinctively but struggled to articulate. The game felt different, and now we were starting to get the language why. And the thing about theories is that while fun, they're still rooted around the event itself and they're trying to explain what's happening. Eventually, people quit trying to explain the legend and start contributing to it. This is where Been Drowned enters the story. The story begins with a college-aged man rediscovering games from his childhood. He stumbles across a garage sale and finds an unsettling copy of Majora's Mask. The cartridge is strange, the owner is stranger. The narrator even makes it a point to express that he would never interact with this person if not for the public setting. Nevertheless, they're given the game, a weird smile, and some cryptic words, all for the price of free. I made a new file named Link out of tradition and started the game, ready to relive my childhood. So I did kind of the same thing in Ocarina of Time. Since this is The Legend of Zelda, I naturally assumed that I'm supposed to name myself Zelda. So I created my file, Zedla. I was like 5, whatever, I couldn't spell, I don't know. I even looked at the box, I don't know what happened. Years later, around 10 or 11 years old, I replayed the game, and I saw my old file, and even though I knew I was Link now, I still wanted to do it right. This time, I would spell Zelda properly. I began a new save, typed in my name, Zedla, again. But this story is not meant to be a recollection of Been Drowned. See this narration here by Dark Somnium if you want the full story without having to actually read. But what's funny about the narrator from Been Drowned is that he is the exact person that we've been talking about. Someone who had heard the stories but missed the original event, and then they were returning years later to finally experience this legend for themselves. And what strikes me the most about Been Drowned isn't necessarily the story itself, it's the way the story is written. The events feel dreamlike, vague, as if the narrator is struggling to separate memory from imagination. The details blur together, and what's left are just the emotional landmarks. The unsettling elegies of emptiness statues, skull kids threatening presence, the feeling that something is watching, and the feeling that something is just wrong. The narrator even begins dreaming about the game, and despite every warning sign, he just keeps returning to it, drawn forward by the same fascination that drew so many players to Majora's Mask in the first place. And so, over the course of 26 years, Majora's Mask completed the same transformation as countless stories before it. The game became a legend. Not because everyone played it, but because so many people did not. The original audience grew older, many haven't touched it in decades, and with each passing year, people are less and less likely to return to the game. And yet, somehow, the story and the interest in the story persist. Zelda's strangest game, with the falling moon and the weird mask and the one that felt haunted. And that really was haunted. The one that everyone seems to know, even if they never played it. Legends don't survive through first-hand experience. They survive through retelling, passed from person to person, friend to friend, creator to viewer, until eventually the story becomes larger than the thing that inspired it. Long ago, a volcanic eruption became a war between gods, and somehow, a Nintendo 64 game became folklore.